So, hello, my name is Michael Tadorn, and I am the host of the Landscape Architecture podcast for today's episode. In today's episode, I am with Steve Radosevich and Kim Garrison. And welcome, we are here at the Mystery Ranch. So, if Kim, you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Kim Garrison. I'm one half of the artist team United Catalysts. And this is my childhood ranch that my grandfather built out here in the East Mojave Desert. And we're here exploring the plants and animals and just letting the desert and this environment influence our work.
And Steve?
Yeah.
Hello.
I'm the other half of the United Catalysts. And we've been working together for something like 20 years, close to that. And a big part of it's been out here. And we're out here a good part of the year, once a month at least. And our environment here, we're talking about plants a lot today, I think, but the animals are a big part of what we get out of the place too.
Storytelling. What the land has to say.
And let's break down a little bit, the words united and catalyst. So catalyst is like a chain reaction, and then united is uniting. How does that play into your guys' work?
It does, in fact.
I think that as artists, we've always been a kind of a combination of mechanics and healers. And so catalysts are kind of brought into the formula to cause it to happen.
To transform.
Cause transformations to happen at a particular time. And a lot of what we do as artists is really that entirely.
I think as artists, we're interested in transforming spaces, and also these psychic transformations, the transformations that occur within our lives and within ourselves, and how we use objects and actions as people to help with our inner transformations.
So your first project was a community performance using industrial strength sage. What is that?
The sage wasn't industrial strength, but our method of dispensing it.
I feel it might have been.
I think you might be right, Michael. Yeah, I mean, it was an industrial strength amount of sage.
It probably was.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about that piece and how did that come about?
Yeah.
That's when we came up with the name United Catalysts, when we started in on that. And that's when we became a partnership, is when we started on that purification project. Happened at Cal State Long Beach. And the sculpture department was
about a mile away from everything else, and it was really disturbed. It was unhealthy. The people were feeling bad about the space, the environment that they were in, and there were creative people trying to have inspiration and be creative, and that was not working with how they felt about the space.
So this was like a big smudging?
right. And it was because the whole art department was kind of in this predicament that had been brought on by this huge renovation of the buildings and things. And but there was just this sense of foreboding all the time and just unease. And it was at the outset industrial strength smudging was the idea, but through the process we learned a lot about ritual and how it works, and it became much bigger.
Yeah, and like spaces, like, we make up opinions about our environments based on the history we have with them and the stories that get told about it, and some of the feeling about whether the space is cared for or not. And we realized that just by bringing people together to make a performance that was a ritual, that was caring for the space and listening to people's ideas about how the space should function as opposed to how it was not functioning, was a way to actually transform people's attitudes, even if the space itself wasn't able to transform during that construction time. And it really taught us a lot about people's notions about the environment that they live in, the built environment or the natural landscape. That there's a whole set of factors that go into someone's opinion about whether they like or feel comfortable in a space. And so we learned that from doing that project, and we used the sage and this smudging, which is a tradition of the area. This was in Southern California, and so this is local white sage that has been used for thousands of years to burn to purify spaces. And we ended up building a large machine that would purify it, and that we would turn a crank and it would go out in the 4 directions. And there were other aspects from other traditions that had to do with purifying things. So we culled from the traditions of the world. What do humans do when they want to change their notions of an environment?
So the piece is,
Yeah.
so the piece is both performative and there's a tangible aspect to it as well. And then, of course, if areas are being purified, then we don't know how far that art actually extends, or like it seems like it would be hard to quantify in a sense. Like there seems to be a moment of trust that you just kind of have to let go.
I think that was a big part of what we were working with and what we've always worked with. Our becoming United Catalysts, I feel like it came down to this moment when we started this project, and I was saying, yeah, we should make this machine that burns this sage, and Kim says, if we do this, it has to be 100% sincere, and I think that moment when she said that kind of changed everything for us in terms of how art is performed, and it's carried through with the things we do. It's, we'll have a goofy sense of humor about the things we do, and we're a little bit like coyotes with our just the way we interact with people. But as far as what we're intending to do, we are entirely sincere with it, and I think that it's an important thing, and I think it's something that people really want from their art. Not everybody, I guess.
No, but it is one of the functions that art has provided for tens of thousands of years. Is that function of sincere healing and interaction with the larger parts of life, and our interaction with the environment. And it's always traditionally been performed in a sincere, if trickstery sometimes, way.
Both of you attended UNLV, University of Nevada of Las Vegas, and got your MFAs, your Masters in Fine Arts. But the interesting part about your MFA is that you guys did it jointly under the umbrella of United Catalyst. How did that come about, and how are you perceived with the faculty and going about making your work under doing a joint?
UNLV, I think, really reached out to us I mean, that was a lot to ask. And they sort of didn't ask any questions. They took it at face value. You guys are applying as a team. You're doing all your work as a team, and they accepted us that way. There may have been individual faculty members that wanted to kind of knock on us and see what we were made of in terms of that. But I feel like they kind of went out on a limb to do that because it was sort of unprecedented. They said it was unprecedented in the system, which I don't know if it is.
I've still never heard of another team getting an MFA in studio art together. I feel like they had just had an artist couple as part of their program, and they thought that their experience with us as an artist team would be something like the experience of that people who were a couple. And then once we got there, they found out that we were not a couple, and that we weren't going to really be working on our own separate projects, but that we truly were going to do everything together. And that enables us to do larger, more complicated projects that have a lot of facets and uses our skill sets, which are different but overlapping. And it was a great experience to get to spend 3 years on larger projects.
And a lot of research,
Yeah, and time.
Yeah, we were really chasing down kind of a lot of kinds of things. And
What is some of the highlight pieces that you guys created while you're there? Was it your thesis, or was there something in the middle of the process that's very memorable to either you guys or maybe to the outside looking in? I know my piece that I like.
The truth is, I feel like they were brave in taking us as a team, but there were problems with the whole setup, as Kim was starting to imply, and they really wanted us to purify the place because they had a big fight, I think, before we arrived, and so we were constantly coming to terms with that and how to go about doing it because it was such an odd place, and so we had to really break down the whole time that we were there in terms of making progress in different ways to kind of prepare them for the things. So in the middle, we had the growing circle piece, planting circle piece, planting circle growth ring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that did a great job in kind of bringing those people outside of their protective shell and allowing some kind of change to happen.
That's probably my favorite piece there too.
The growing circle?
Yeah. We were in these two different environments. We were in Las Vegas, which is like the ultimate built environment and the ultimate
During the ultimate economy as well, right? That was right about the time when things were really going crazy.
The strip was booming crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the architecture was crazy, and the culture.
Right, and then even UNLV, the art department itself was an amazing place at that time. There was a lot going on.
It was a city full of celebration of everything, like artificial and built and sparkly and neon. And
Yes.
then, we would commute from the desert south of there. It was about an hour and a half commute at the time. From here. And this is the exact opposite environment. And so those were big influences on the work that we did, and it it um, it introduced us to some notions that people have about the natural world, and a lot of our work was kind of speaking about those perceptions. And one perception was that nothing will grow here in Las Vegas. It's pointless to try to make this art project. The Growing Circle invited people to write down something that they wanted to grow within themselves. Internally, you know, like I want to not be so hard on myself. I want to grow, you know, my own self-confidence, or I want to self-love. I want to grow some self-love, or you know, I want to reach out to other people, or whatever it was. Who cares what it was? It was their thing, and then they converted that into this bundle of seeds and soil and pigment that was wrapped up in some canvas and then tied to a circle. So you would see everything that everyone else wants to grow at the same time. And it was a public art project for that community. And then there was a week of it being the planting circle where everyone is growing these pouches. And then after that week, over the weekend, we went and undid all the pouches and made a growth ring with soil. We watered everything so the pigment would leach out into the canvas squares, and we sewed these prayer flags that also served to protect the garden that we were growing. And you know, people were telling us, you know, nothing will grow here. This is a great gesture that you're doing, but nothing will grow in this environment.
In a patronizing way?
No. They would say, you know, I understand what you're trying to do, but it's just not going to work. And because the idea was really, and this is the whole thing, is in terms of ritual, you're always dealing with metaphor. And really what we were wanting to do is have people grow their dreams and have a ritual that proves that is a thing and would work.
Right.
And so these are a lot of these people that had told themselves after living in Las Vegas for years and years, you can't grow your dreams. Your dreams will die. Inside they were feeling that and feeling the pain of that. And then kind of transferring that to the idea that plants won't grow either, because nobody had yards there either. They'd have these big front yards full of dirt and things like that.
And we have
probably tried once,
Yeah.
you know, with something, and then it died, and so they just decided that forever this was too harsh an environment to grow anything. And of course things grew, a beautiful ring of plants grew, and people started, we left a rake out in a watering can, and people were making a Zen raking pattern, and they were out there watering. And so, you know, through the support of community, they did all make it happen.
And again, you guys have already self-declared a like manifesto of sincerity, and now it's just has to permeate to your audience. And then I suppose that after that, you won some people over. And then was it able then to propose and materialize works along that line much easier? That growing ring was a success?
It was, and it worked. It worked for that environment for a couple of reasons, and one of them was that people could participate in it without other people seeing them. They could come at any time and do it, and so they could get in touch with the sincere part of themselves that wanted this to happen and wanted these things to happen, but just didn't want to be seen as somebody who believes in something that can't happen.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's really true.
And I think that helped it a lot. And after that, we were able to do things where we were more visible, or they would be more visible in their participation.
But there is always a new audience for each performance or public art piece, and so you have to win over a new set of people in the idea of sincerity,
Yeah.
and make them believe. I think that creating space for people, creating an immersive experience in art, is leading people from what's familiar to them to something that feels more unfamiliar, but becomes comfortable for them to at least investigate, even if the ideas that are within the art piece may feel uncomfortable.
I think when we were undergrads and we were working on the purification project, there was still all this talk about is this real? Is this fake? You know, and this kind of notion that everything in art is sort of supposed to be fake and supposed to be commenting on something else about art, and
Right.
and there wouldn't be access to it for regular people, and we just found out that wasn't true, and that people really wanted this kind of art, or they wanted things that were sincere, and
Some people,
and
some of the time.
most, you know, most people, or they want to meet you halfway. They're willing to, and they're willing to put out the effort to do it.
But then the more that you guys make this work, then I believe probably the more you carry yourselves with a quiet confidence to where you could just wait for people to come around. I would imagine when you're younger, making work like this, you might be a little bit anxious waiting around, which was like probably the worst thing to do.
We had a lot of enthusiasm
Mhm.
based on all the discovery we were making, though.
Okay.
And I think that carried us over those kinds of things, don't you think?
Yeah.
I think it's a lot easier to make art that's sarcastic or snarky or hip,
Mm.
Like fashionable and while we were at Las Vegas, what was hip was plastic and shiny, and we had people asking us, well, why don't you have plastic in your materials, or why don't you use some shiny lacquer colors, or some neon or something, and it was like, that sounds good, that sounds hip, that sounds now and popular and maybe referring to the materials that the art world is using at the time. But for us, this is what the materials are coming from for us. Our environment is here, and just that we've always had a comfortableness and feeling of that it's right to use what makes sense to us and what feels like our real landscape that we're a part of.
I think they wanted us to be influenced by our stay in Vegas. We want to see evidence that Las Vegas has influenced you. And
I think you guys were already there, and they needed to see the influence that was already.
Right. We were influenced by it, but at the core and not at the superficial level. And that we were moving past the superficial all the time and trying to get to the meat and bones of it. And, and that was something they were sort of afraid of. I think they weren't comfortable with the underlying layers of Las Vegas. They were very comfortable with the superficiality of it. And yeah.
So, after you completed your thesis work, right? Your last final show, then where did your artwork go from there? Was there a little bit of a death and then a reborn, or did it just transition into, is it one long piece? Like, is there like a stamp? Like, how does that timeline play out?
It wasn't a smooth transition because we had lots of life changes to deal with too. And in particular, Kim's grandmother was transitioning away from being able to really live on her own and take care of herself. And that was kind of the most major thing. And we just felt like that was the most important thing that could be going on. And it's continued to inform what we do. The fact that Kim had to stay and kind of be a caregiver for how many years was it?
It was about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I think it grounded us physically in the area so that, it limited our choices as far as what we would go seek as opportunities, and it took us away from some opportunities that we were already investigating. As creative people, I think we all have to figure out a life-work balance, and sometimes what we can do as artists changes based on what environment we're in or around us, our home environment. So, during that period of time, we found that we couldn't necessarily do large projects that maybe involved, building things out of iron and metal and going to another state to go to their iron foundry, or, doing work out of state. And so our art output got smaller and more intimate, and I became a lot more organized as an artist because I realized that, literally every move I made away from her required that I would have another human being there to care for her. And so, that period was really powerful in us building some skills that we've used ever since, because I learned, way more about communication and scheduling and organizing through that experience than I ever did, learning something through graduate school.
And it was a radical change because we had been fairly nomadic for several years,
Yeah.
right before that.
Mm-hmm.
And most of how we had gone about doing the work was as a result of travel and exploration.
And since that period, we've been back to being nomads, and being inspired by going to different landscapes. We did a residency at Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona, and spent 2 weeks there with our iron camera, which is a project where we're investigating the natural processes of the earth, like decay and regeneration and growth patterns and cycles, and we're recording that information with a camera that we made ourselves that's actually made out of the earth itself. And so that was really powerful to take a piece like that. That's sort of an ongoing project for us, to different environments, and have us experience those environments through this device that slows down our observations, makes us pay more attention to the landscape that we're in. We also went to a working cattle ranch that is also an artist residency in West Texas. That was earlier this year.
Last year?
Oh, last year. So that was also an environment that was really working us as very different than the California or the Nevada desert landscape. And when I say environment, I'm talking about both we love studying the plants, the natural landscape, and the flora and the fauna and the rocks and the geology and all that, but also
The kinds of experiences.
Yeah, like
that you have,
yeah,
and that
the
people
experience of the people,
Yeah.
their culture and their perceptions and their ideals and their motivations and morals and politics and religion and
which is
all
a
those things.
giant part of any landscape, is just how people experience it.
Right.
And so plants have always somehow found themselves in your work.
Yeah.
I think, from my understanding, a little bit was not so much like fabricated, but just kind of just was there. If I'm understanding it
Yeah, I think so.
correctly, which kind of brings us here to this ranch.
Mm-hmm.
There is a plant called a Salvia dorii, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that is purple sage. But here, what's happening? What did we find here on this ranch?
So here, there's one that's blooming white, and that is extremely rare. There aren't
examples known. Is that right?
Yeah, we're just finding that there's hints of it here and there, but it's never been studied, and there aren't known examples that people can study. It's something that over the years people have stumbled upon something that looked different, and so there's a record of it somewhere. And we have a little 60-acre piece of this land, which is surrounded by BLM land. That's an area of critical environmental concern. That's desert tortoise habitat. And so we have quite a lot of the desert sage. It's a plant that likes to grow in washes that are, so it likes the sand. And it's very hardy and drought tolerant. It can really go dormant for a number of years and make some decisions as to how much output it will give based on the conditions. And so it's really an interesting plant all on its own, and it's also a very useful plant. It's edible, and it's an herb that is a delicious seasoning and things.
And then today we had Medina from the Mojave Wildlife Trust.
Yeah.
And she was taking clippings.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's going to be working on documenting this process and possibly some propagating a cultivar
Mm-hmm.
of it. And so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been fun working with her. We've been reaching out once we discovered that this was a really special plant, and wanting the resources here at this place to be something that we use to collaborate with researchers and ecologists, and help to inform study of the native plants, and help propagation for restoring habitat, and also for people like landscape architects that want to use native plants in gardens. Yeah.
Where's your work as artist taking you now?
Where's it taking us now, Steve?
That's a great question.
Feeling hungry?
So we do have a performance coming up on Mother's Day. Tell us about it, Kim.
Well, Steve, it's about pancakes. It's about mandala pancakes. And it's a performance in which we will make and serve people these incredibly beautiful handmade pancakes that are full of interesting elixirs and sauces and jams and things that probably will have some of that Salvia dorii as a part of it. And the pancakes and the eating of pancakes is a symbol of the treasures of life. It's something that I did for my grandmother when I was caring for her, because she had lost her interest in food. And so making it beautiful and beautifully arranged was something that was a way I could show her that I loved her, and also like brighten her day and make her pay attention to, what was in front of her. And so that it was like making the invisible visible, because every meal is this special gift that that we get to have, and
she had raised and nurtured you in so many ways. As a child, she was somebody that you could always count on for that,
right.
and fed you.
Yeah.
And so when you were taking care of her, and one of the things that you could do was prepare these meals, and even though she didn't have a lot of interest in the things she was eating,
Mm-hmm.
You could make them into beautiful things and present them with her like as a gift every day.
Right.
And there was a real beauty to that,
Mm-hmm.
and to that offering.
Yeah, there's something about mandalas that are, ordering your space and making this small representation of the universe that makes sense and is beautiful.
We should probably explain that Kim wasn't feeding her grandmother pancakes every day. These
Right,
were just
right.
these were mandalas that she was making of the kinds of food that Grandma wanted.
That's very true.
But since those days, we've been celebrating life with pancakes whenever we get the chance, and have started making these crazy mandala pancake. They're sort of like layer cakes when they're done, and they're mandalas,
Yeah.
and they're all about the joy of the moment and gratefulness for all the things.
Did the process become ritualistic?
For sure. Yeah. And it's a ritual from the growing, like it comes from roots of we grow food to feed ourselves and to feed our families, and we, find the best food at the farmers markets, and it's all about that relationship of like plants as medicine, and so there's something healing about eating. Eating doesn't need to be just put fuel in the fuel tank or something that is a necessity of life, but there's something ritually joyful and healing about preparing, growing, raising, being around the plants that are feeding you, and then actually eating them, especially when that food is a gift from someone else to you. And so we do a lot of, alchemy with food. And food's always been something that we've wanted to thoughtfully provide when we have a performance or are part of a reception for a gallery show, or even people visiting our studio. Kind of like the Japanese tea ceremony. There's some sort of ceremony that ends up happening if you are around us for any length of time that has to do with food.
Tell me about your botanical illustrations.
So there's been a lifelong quest to understand the stories of the plants from this area, and it started with my childhood with taking walks with my grandfather. This was his place, and he would tell me the names of the plants that he knew, and he instilled this idea that it was important to know what the plants are. And in this landscape, it's pretty darn important, because some of the plants can hurt you. They can poke you, and they can stop you in your tracks. And some of them are poisonous, and some of them are tasty. And so when we started working together, there was more of that. We would bring desert plants into the gallery and make whole walls that would be these witnesses of the beauty of this landscape and the diversity. And each of those are like characters for us. They're people that have these essential stories to tell us about survival, about uniqueness, about medicine.
And they have a unique physical presence when you come into contact with them, and then the way they smell, it just changes you.
Yeah, their survival tactics. I mean, there's no end to the stories behind these plants. And for me, drawing them is a way to learn about them, to spend time with them, physically record them. You know, when you spend time in a landscape like this, you get to know which plants bloom in order in the springtime. You know, the Joshua trees and the desert paintbrush blooms first, and then you're gonna get the salvias and the desert marigolds, and then a little later there's the indigo bush, and you know it's a slow unfolding of knowledge over a period of decades. And for me, doing botanical illustration is something that maybe speeds up that process by just spending more time with it, and then it's like a deeper read. And it's something that we both do, that I do more of, but it's like an investigation that also informs our work together, because even though I might be doing the illustrations, the knowledge that I'm getting from it and the experience that I'm sharing with Steve, and then that might be informing our next story that we tell in a gallery that has to do with plants, or the next performance or planting or something like that.
And then once you spent the time understanding a plant, drawing it, and your illustrations are at a level of investigation that's just beyond natural observation, you know, it goes really in depth. So I couldn't imagine that after you've completed drawing a plant that your relationship hasn't changed with that plant afterwards. Each and every single one of them are now intrinsically interwoven with you.
We know them all as people.
Yeah.
You know, we and
it's sort of related to the work we do with the iron camera, where you're slowing down this process of observation, and until it becomes something entirely different, until it becomes a way of communicating and understanding.
it's like a lesson and a meditation. Yeah. Yeah, and it's been really good. And you're right, the illustrations themselves, they sometimes for me become stories beyond just studying a single plant.
And you've compiled them all into one book, is that correct? Or some of them?
Yes and no. I've done my own botanical drawings, and then Steve and I, through an illustration class that I sometimes teach, we spearheaded 2 books, both about native plants. One was a Southern California native plants coloring book, and the other was an ABC coloring book, an abecedarium of Mojave Desert plants. And so we had, there were about 25 students in my class, and all of the students worked on the illustrations. And then I worked with them on the descriptions, the investigations. I took them out to the environment. We took them to a local native plant nursery, Tree of Life, in San Juan Capistrano, and worked with them so that they could see actual specimens and see those plants in nature. And a lot of those students, even though they live near nature, have never been out there in it and don't know anything about the natural landscape and the stories of those plants. So it was a really great way to get them invested in seeing the stories and the wonders of the world around them, and especially the beautiful diversity of plants that we have in Southern California. And then, we compiled all of those into publications, and those are sold at Tree of Life, and we've sold them at other places, and then they also raise money for the program of the school.
That's great.
Yeah, that's good. One day, I will perhaps, spearhead us to make our own books on that. Right now, it's individual prints. Yeah.
And then have you displayed those prints in a gallery setting in their own?
Yeah, they go into botanical art shows. Yeah. I've also been consulting with the BLM for Southern Nevada for this actual area of critical environmental concern that surrounds here on botanical illustrations to help educate and inform people that come here to this area and students out there in the Las Vegas area. So I'm working with them on ideas for how to use native plant illustrations to tell stories and do that.
Great. Let's see. What is your Skywheel project?
I've been talking a lot. Steve, do you want to take this one? It's just a little project. This shouldn't take too much time, right?
It's just a little project called the Skywheel Project.
So we were invited to go out to big museum in Roswell, New Mexico. What's the name of that museum?
It's the Roswell Museum and Art Center.
That's right. A friend of ours was working there as a curator of exhibitions, I think. And he said, why don't you come out for a week and we'll open up the archives to you. And that was because years before, I had been to the museum before he had worked there, Andrew Cecil. And I had shown him a bunch of photographs I'd taken of exhibits there that Robert Goddard, the rocket pioneer, was responsible for. And the rocket parts and pieces of rocket experiments that were there were some of the most beautiful sculpture I'd seen in a long time. And you could read them in a mechanical way. And so he said, come out here. All of Goddard's stuff is here. I guess whatever wasn't in the Smithsonian is what he meant. And so we were looking at all the patent drawings, and we were looking at all the things they had. And kind of had gone into it without an agenda, other than kind of pure research of things that we were interested in anyway. And while we were there, one of the other things that we'd been thinking about were Tibetan Buddhist ritual objects. And the two things kind of went together, and Kim was looking at a lot of mandala forms in the records of patents that
His patents
yeah,
of the rockets.
there were an enormous number of patents for rockets. Most of them were posthumous, and they covered almost everything there was to do with space travel. And we got the idea of making a prayer wheel as a satellite. And it kind of went from there. And like a lot of things...
And when you mean satellite, you mean something that will go into orbit outside of...
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Go
a
around
physical manifestation piece, leaves our atmosphere,
I think
goes into
originally
space.
what happened was I said, this would really work, a prayer wheel in space. It's spinning, and that's all they have to do in order to broadcast blessings.
Can you explain a prayer wheel a little bit?
So a prayer wheel is physically it's kind of this big spool of text, and traditionally it will be mantras, and as it spins, it's as though you were reading those mantras aloud, and whatever benefit you would get from doing that, it's compounded by every time it spins around. And if there's 10,000 of them on there, you get the benefit of 10,000 of them per revolution. It's a mechanical prayer wheel.
It's a prayer machine.
It's a prayer machine.
Yeah, it's a prayer machine.
And the traditional ones, they're either you hold them in your hand and you spin them as you're praying, or there's bigger ones that you can walk by and move. Some are moved by the wind, and some are moved by currents of water, like a water wheel. And from what I read about it, if the wind moves the prayer wheel, it's going to broadcast those prayers everywhere that wind goes. Or if the water moves it everywhere that water goes, it's blessing that area. And everything that's within, sight of the thing, gets that. So we thought, if it's in space, it's hitting the Earth on every angle. This would work perfectly. And if it had prayers and blessings from all the different kinds of people on the Earth, they would work pretty good.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, this is the thing that always happens. I'll say something like that to Kim, and then she'll say, well, we could actually build a satellite that went into orbit and did that. And then the next thing that happens is, we should.
Yeah. And now you're researching how to do and make that happen, and all the fun things that
Turns
come.
out it's not all that hard to do. The space engineers, it's just it's payload to them. It makes perfect sense.
Well, how much do prayers weigh?
It's a good question.
That's a deep question.
That's a deep question.
I mean, an engineer would actually say,
Yeah.
well, it weighs this certain amount.
Yeah, but they're looking at it as how much does the text weigh. So
Yeah, and we're imagining that this will go up higher than communication satellites are usually positioned. So they're up for a handful of years, and then they fall to Earth. And so this would be about 1,000-kilometer high orbit, and that's a lot higher orbit. It can go that high because it doesn't have any active electronics. We're using this, thousands of year old prayer spinning wheel technology to broadcast those prayers back down to the Earth.
it would stay on station for at least 1,000 years, if not indefinitely, is what they told us. And since it's spinning, that's all it has to do to be active,
Right.
and it would never stop doing that. And the part of the sky it's in is the Van Allen radiation belt. So there wouldn't be any other satellites up there because that thing tends to wreck your electronics. So it's not in the realm of space junk.
It's exciting to us because it's a public art project, but it's up in territory where you don't often have art, and it's an environmental project, but it's about the Earth as a whole, and
Yeah.
we feel like the Earth can really use some love and attention and coming together and some intentions set in the same way that the planting circle growth ring project was about people setting their individual intentions, but then watching them collectively grow and putting the energy into that growth, the work into it. I feel like, we really need to set some intentions for the earth and taking care of this as an environment and a home, and then, use the energy of those intentions to put some actions forward. And it's up there in a territory where it would exist for 1,000 years, and that's also this opportunity to have us all think about, well, what do we want in the earth? What blessings would we like for the earth in the next 1,000 years? And be like thinking, about the future of the planet.
Or inviting people to think of themselves as ancestors of the people who come after us.
Yeah.
And I think we're all much too interested in ourselves and not in our progeny, as human
Mm-hmm.
beings.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the kind of thing that says most people can't imagine the world in 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any problem imagining it 1,000 years ago.
Right.
But the idea of there being a world in 1,000 years, or if people would even exist, or we would exist in the same way, it's kind of hurtful for people at this period of time.
Yeah.
And it's time to have something that is making us think about that in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. So we're collecting prayers and blessings and contributions to this project in terms of text from individuals, and people can email us through the website.
This is the open call.
Yeah, it's an open call. We've been collecting for almost a decade. We've also reached out to people from different parts of the world and
Different
religions
traditions.
and cultural traditions. A while back, we went to the Parliament of the World's Religions in Australia to meet with religious leaders and invite people to give text to the project. And it's not a religious project, but it's also nice to have prayers that are from traditions from, that represent our history and culture and different kinds of perception and perspective and thought. So we're both collecting things that are about tradition and also a tradition for caring for the earth and for blessing, and also just individual intentions for blessings for the planet.
It'd be really nice to do a follow-up interview when we go into space. I think that would be a lot of fun to document that process as it gets closer. And what is your website? So how can people reach out if they want to, look at any of your work or collaboration or the Skywheel project or any of the numerous things that you guys have done and accomplished?
Mm-hmm. The website is unitedcatalystsart.com. And we are catalysts plural because there are two of us.
Great. And then also obviously have the links on the website and the podcast as well and stuff. So thank you guys very much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
It's a real pleasure.
And thank you very much.